Well, it's Wednesday, so time to read some comics again. And don't have any new ones for this week, but thought I would delve back into Star Trek, the early voyages, because it's been a while since I did. And also, Strange New Worlds is currently underway with its second season. And if you've seen my reviews of those episodes so far, it's no good. Yeah, there's little moments here and there, but that's few and far between, and that's about all you can do. So, of course, I had known about this series, but never read it or looked into it and forgotten about it and all that. And then when the Strange New Worlds came about, I thought, well, let me go see how the comics did it. And for the most part, it's much better. It certainly does its best to stay within the continuity established by the original show and all that, and added a little more. And it's 3 issues I've read, and I'm going to discuss. The latter 2 are a 2-parter. This is a single issue concentrating on this character. And what's interesting about this is that one of the things I always thought about a Pike series of his era and times, the same thing, was that the character of Spock couldn't be the main alien. He couldn't be one of the main characters. He would have more of a position that a Sulu or Chekhov would have, because if you have him front and center, I mean, maybe once in a while there's an episode where he's really important to it, but you can't avoid character development of who Spock is and how he develops and becomes over the original series, which is much later for him. So you really had to keep him at a distance, and so you needed to introduce another alien character who could play more of a role in it. That's not exactly what they do here, but they do have him available in this character. Now, they did have the Andorian for Strange New Worlds, and he was barely there, and then they killed him off in the Alien ripoff episode, or Aliens ripoff. And my guess is, oh boy, that makeup is really expensive. So he had to go. Or maybe it was the actor wasn't available for very long. I don't know, but still, they do things. They went way beyond what they should have done with Spock on that show, and of course, it's because they really don't know what they're doing. So anyway, this is an issue that hey, who's this guy? His name is Nano, just Nano, not Nanu, and he has to go home to his planet Lyria. Is it burning? Well, kind of. But all is not what it seems. Yeah. So it starts off where one of Nano's people, he's burned alive here. Like, oh, man, what's this all about? And then we cut back to the Enterprise, and there's Pike. And that's not a bad drawing of Pike. And, oh, look, the old phaser. See, that's what it should look like in this era. Yeah. So anyway, the deal is they're I guess I'm already forgetting, kind of like a clone species, but they certainly genetically manipulate their people and designate their roles in society even before they're born and all that. And when it came for them to join the Federation, when they're very, very isolationist, they don't really want to mingle with other species, but there were benefits to being a member of the Federation. They genetically designed Nano to be the guy who would go into the ship, but they're very, very conscious of their population numbers, and when they lose one, they're like, oh, they got to hurry up and replace it. So they need Nano to come back and replace this guy who's mysteriously died. And that's the premise here. And they're telepathic beings, and so he's got to come back and be a part of the consciousness and all of that. But he's been on the Enterprise and among other people, our species, and so he's kind of a fish out of water in his own home. and it has problems with that, of course, and it's very much like a Star Trek episode in that, where he's like, I'm not sure. He confides in Carlotti here, and stuff like that. And so, they work it out, but he's going to try. He feels it's his duty and all that. And there they beam down and see, yeah, they wore those jackets, That's an element you probably could have utilized in a show. No, never mind. But oh no, there's another death, and this guy burns up, and oh, what's going on? Ultimately, the plot of the reveal so much is kind of a takeoff from Forbidden Planet, where their powerful psychic powers gives way to the subconscious, the id and all that, and their fears of the outside and fear of foreigners or aliens or whatnot has created this manifestation that's killing them. So they're going to have to figure that out. And ultimately, Nano is determined he'd rather be on the Enterprise. He'd rather have his life outside of Lyria and all that. And along the way, that can help them open up, because as long as they stay contained within themselves, this sort of thing is going to continue to happen. And already they've joined the Federation, and they can't just pretend there isn't a whole other universe outside their world and that sort of thing. So that's basically what happens there. And so it's a quick little study of an introduction to this character and what his background is. And then you have this thing where he's like, I'd rather be on the Enterprise. It's the only life he's known, so it's understandable and all that. So it's not bad. It's a pretty good little, issue rather than episode, but still. Even though, it's borrowing from the Forbidden Planet, which Forbidden Planet works very well as a Star Trek episode. But they craft it within this study a lot better than what Strange New Worlds does with aliens, where they almost top to bottom, and then they convert the Gorn into being the aliens, xenomorphs and stuff. It's like there's no background for that. And so with very little else, it's just, the Andorian guy, he'd rather die than be killed by the Gorn's eggs in him. Stuff like that. But the comic book did it better. Meanwhile, later on, or the next issue rather, issue 10, we have we central in on this character, Carlotti, I think. But it delves into the Tholians, which you didn't know a whole lot about in the original series. And when they encountered him, when Kurt got stuck in between realities and he was floating around like a ghost and, help me, I'm running out of air and all that. And they did their Tholian web and whatnot. Here, they take a page out of the Dominion, I think, where there's these people called the Chakakan, and they're the shock troops of the Tholians, as it says here. Well, for the Dominion, they had the Jem'Hadar. Now, this is in 97, so I'm not sure when all that was introduced on Deep Space Nine, but it's the same scenario, and they're completely loyal to the Tholians, but were they manipulated and completely conquered by the Tholians in the way that the Jem'Hadar were by the Dominion, and kept perpetually addicted to a drug they can't live without. If they disobey the Dominion, they'll die of horrible withdrawals and stuff like that. So it's kind of a similar deal. It doesn't go into why. They just seem to be very loyal to the Tholians. And but anyway, that you get this species, and it looks pretty sinister. They're basically centaurs or something. But and that would be rather expensive to do for a TV show, I imagine. But when you're in a comic book, hey, you can make your aliens as aliens you want. Although when the creature takes its helmet off, it kind of just looks like a woman. So they're like, oh, but this is another thing they've tread before too, in Star Trek at least, where she suffered this horrible tragedy and her home world got destroyed by the Jakun or Jakun. And here they're doing it again with their weird bat scorpion ships. And they're attacking a Federation colony and destroying everything. And Pike, another good drawing of Pike here, has been ordered to assemble a squadron or fleet of ships to go counter them. It doesn't go well. They escape and they gotta rethink it. So they go back home, and Pike decides to visit with Dad. You know, in a previous issue, he was led to believe that he had died or something like that, and of course it was an illusion and all that. But now he wants to go meet with him, but their relationships are the cold, and they can't get through. And number one's trying to help him out, but they're stubborn. That old thing, you know. But they got to get back into it, and they do. Meanwhile, poor Carlotti, well, her colony had been destroyed by these monsters, and most of her family was killed, and it's just her and her two very young brothers had survived, and so she's having nightmares about it and everything. Sleeping on a shuttle trip back on Earth with, Colton, what's his name? And so she's itching for revenge against these creatures, and it looks like the opportunity will happen if they can survive the initial battle. They start again, and it looks pretty bad. You know, they outnumber them, and there's the Federation ships meeting them, and that's where it ends. But it's you would have these characters, and I'll never trust such and such or whatever. You know, it goes all the way back to Bounds of Terror, where the guy, hated the Romulans, even though he'd never met one, and all that type of stuff. And pretty sure he still hated them even at the end. His father was killed by him in the original Romulan War and all that sort of stuff. And you revisit this where you have different characters who've had really horrific experiences with other alien species. And despite all the, the highfalutin values of the Federation society and everything, this is their personal experience, and so how they weave it out. And you can kind of imagine where this is going to go in the next issue. And yes, it once again takes from an idea of another sci-fi film, and but they still do it better than Strange New Worlds. That's because it's not totally top to bottom in the way they did with Aliens, for example. So the title tells it all, doesn't it? Carlotti's Revenge. She's got her phaser shotgun ready. But in last issue, she's found herself and with a wounded Chakun or whatever they're called. And that meanwhile, the main battle is taking place in orbit, and Pike has got to manage that. But here she is investigating a downed a Chakun vessel, and she's overwrought within it. She's point blank, and she's screaming at the creature there. And this is what she looks like. So she's practically human, except for the horse body. And so they go back and forth. You massacred my people. You're invading our territory. So the misunderstandings between the two. But now that she's actually seeing a face she can communicate with, well, it's a little different. And so she can't quite kill this woman, I guess. And that's the deal. So the movie I was thinking of is Enemy Mine, where you have the two brutal enemies, but they both crash on a planet, and the war has passed them by. They're stuck there, and they end up depending on each other, and they get to know each other and actually care about each other. Louis Gossett Jr. gives birth to a baby. And Quaid, he's got to raise the baby. It's the whole thing about, they came to understand. If we only talked to each other, maybe we wouldn't have war, and that kind of thing. But again, this is not top to bottom. It's a brief encounter in the midst of this battle. But with all, she's burning for revenge, desire of revenge, and here's her chance to kill one of them, make her pay for what happened, which probably didn't have anything to do with it, but nevertheless, she's a soldier in that squadron or what have you. And, but then face to face, they're talking it out, and she thinks this, then that's not what we were doing, and all this misunderstanding about the colony and all that. That's the display of it, and it does it on its own. Meanwhile, you got your soap opera elements. This guy's got the hots for Colt, and she's coming around to thinking, yeah, he'd make a good boyfriend. And so, yeah, that's nice, isn't it? Meanwhile, the Federation's not doing so great against their ships. They got a much more deadlier weapon. And one of them comes up with an idea of tricking them into not suspecting shuttles to be all that dangerous, but they filled the shuttles full of photon torpedoes and then shot it and exploded in the maul of their main weapon, and it blew up their ships and stuff. And so, but eventually they surround that ship and destroy it. I think the Enterprise managed to save some of them, but probably not the captain. But anyway, but the thing is, Pike does the exact same thing later. The Enterprise poops out a shuttle doing the same. The ship falls for it. And, well, whoops. They bit off more than they could chew. Should have paid attention, huh? So, the horse people are kind of stupid, I guess, in some aspect. You fall for the same trick twice. But anyway, so the battle breaks off, and they're like, oh, they're leaving. I guess we hurt them worse than we thought, or what have you. But no, what it is, it turns out she's a high-ranking commander in this for the Jakun, and they go back. They come to rescue her, and she says, no, leave her alone. No, there's no need to kill her. So they had some understanding there, and when she goes back, she decides to break it off. We need to rethink this. And that maybe there could be a diplomatic solution with, these humans or what have you. So that's how that works out. Hey, it's a bit fanciful, but, well, it's how it plays. My guess is Strange New Worlds have more emphasis on this, the soap opera stuff, which it's fine, because that's really the only thing they excel at, basically. Well, they don't really excel at it, but and this sort of thing about, you misunderstood, but they would have to show that the Federation was, enormously wrong in all of this in some form of fashion type of thing, instead of, well, both sides have their points. That's usually how that works, and that's why it makes it so hard to negotiate and whatnot. But that's the only way to avoid war, because the consequences of which, well, you're seeing it. See, you get frackoom. So, but that's the seriousness you take it with, even in fanciful stories like Star Trek. So, once again, it's this isn't the greatest thing in the world, not the greatest sci-fi comic, but it just does a more competent job than the Strange New Worlds show does. And in fact, they actually go to a strange new world several times in this series. So, they got that going for them. So anyway, there we go. I'll revisit some more Star Trek comics in the future for Mr. Nailsin's Wednesday Comics. And I thank you for watching, and we'll do it again next Wednesday.